being very, very honest with the team and say, I actually don't know the answer to this. So asking for advice, like not, yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes and don't be afraid to say you don't know.
Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Talent Podcast, the go-to podcast for creatives to look for new ways of thinking about their career, life, and practice. I'm your host, Betty. So on today's podcast, you're going to hear a candid conversation about what it's like to work in the arts nonprofit, and also a glimpse into the other facet of my career. A lot of you who listen to this podcast know me as a coach for creators and a filmmaker. But some of you might not know that in the past decade, I've worked in the arts and cultural nonprofits sector in Canada specifically. And I've accumulated a lot of live and work experience and perspective of the life of being an arts administrator and a career development. In fact, in my fundraising career, originally I was working in arts nonprofits as a fundraiser. And a lot of people had wondered, myself included, at some point in my career, would one day I want to become or take the position of wanting to be an executive director? For those of you who are in the art sector or have been in the art sector before, you probably know this dream. For people who enter the arts administrative route, kind of the behind the scene hero of the art sector, the ultimate route of success, or often the perceived route of success, is that ultimately becoming a senior manager or executive director of an arts organization. Sitting here today, obviously, I didn't choose that route, but I also know that this job or the path of arts administrator is probably one of the most challenging and at the same time rewarding career path for any of you out there who really enjoy facilitating opportunities for artists. So it's necessary then, I think, to have a candid conversation about what it's like to work as an arts executive director or managing director or leader in the sector. So that's those of you who are looking to choose this career path, or those of you who are recently becoming or became the first time executive director, you are preparing yourself to know what to expect and what not to expect. I want to preface by saying that the guests on today's episode and myself don't really have the perfect answers, and we don't pretend to know the sector all in and out, even though we're very experienced. But rather, we are just holding space for a conversation to start dialogue. And perhaps, I hope, talk about some stuff that are not very explicitly talked about often when people are thinking about this career path. I'm very excited to have this conversation with Marta Keller-Hernandez. Originally from Spain, Marta is an arts administrator who moved to Toronto in 2012. In Toronto, Marta has worked with a wide range of arts and cultural organizations. Currently, she is the managing director at Mural Routes. Marta is also the co-founder and director of programming of Paralia Newcomer Arts Network. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Marta. Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Talent Podcast. So today I'm very, very excited because I have one of my fundraising clients here. Uh, and she's also someone that I've had a lot of conversations about the art sector and about leadership in the art sector. So much so that I just realized we might have as well just record an episode on the podcast and have a conversation here. So I'm very excited to welcome you, Mother. Thank you for coming to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Betty, for having me.
Can you tell the audience a bit about what you do and a bit about your background and your career journey?
Yeah. So Currently, I'm the managing director at Mural Routes. We are a small but mighty organization. You know, sort of like if I had to put it in one sentence, dedicated to the advancement of mural art in Canada. We do a lot of different things, but like if I had to say something about Mural Roots in one sentence, that would be it. Um, I've been with Mural Roots for since 2017, so that's what, like 6 years now. 6 years now. I started there as a program manager, and then when the former executive director retired, sort of took over the managing director role. So I've been in this position since July of 2018. So yeah, almost it's gonna be what, like the fifth year now. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, my background, though, I'm originally from Spain. I moved to Canada in 2012, and my background is in tourism. That's what I did in Spain. I went to school, I went to university for a degree in tourism. That was my passion. I have to say that like arts administration was my passion as well, but it
Hmm.
was very difficult to make it work in Spain. Like, I'm from a small town, and you have to live in a big city to really, like, access opportunities. So, it was not a viable career in Spain. Not that, I mean, we could have a conversation about whether it's a viable career in Canada, but
We're getting to that soon.
yeah, but it was what I really wanted to do. So in 2012, the situation in Europe was not great. So my husband and I moved to Canada, and really, like, looking to stay here for a year and learn English for a year and improve. And sort of like live the experience as well. So moved here, and then within 4 months, my husband had a really good job.
Hmm.
Um, like, really, like, in his field. So we decided to stay. So I went to school, or back to school, I guess, in like my late 20s. I went to Centennial College, took a program that was called Culture and Heritage Site Management. I don't think the program exists anymore. It has, like, sort of transitioned into something else. But that's what I did back in 2013. And from there, I started working in the arts. So since then, I've worked with a number of different organizations. I've worked with Black Artists Network's Dialogue Band. I've worked with Art Starts for like a little summer there. From band, I went to Soar Gallery and Latin American Canadian art projects for a couple of years, running their gallery space by the lake. And from there, I landed this program manager position in Mural Roots.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that's it's been quite a journey, I have to say.
It
Um,
has.
yeah, I've been like, honestly, like, it's been what, like 10 years now in Canada.
Hmm.
Um, I've paid my dues. I've worked in retail as a new immigrant, and then when I
Yeah.
went back to Centennial, that really really changed. Um, it really changed my career and, like, the opportunities that I was able to access.
Wow. You just painted us a picture of someone who successfully kind of make a transition from a completely different industry and a completely different country. What do you think supported you in this 10-year journey?
Well, multiple things. First of all, I would say, like, immigrating, it's such a mind shift. Um, it makes you feel that you can push through anything, and
Mm,
it was really interesting to me because like, suddenly it's almost like that feeling that you start from scratch. Like, you've built this career in another country, and then you get in Canada and you're brand new to everyone. To me, it was the opportunity to be the person that I wanted to be. Like, it was like an opportunity to reinvent myself. Of like, oh, I'm switching countries. This is what I want to do. I want to work in the arts. So let's try. If it doesn't work out, like, what's the worst case scenario? I'll work in tourism or like something else. Like.
Right.
So it's like the mind shift, like the opportunity itself of like relocating to another country. But also, I have to say, it was really being able to be married to someone who could pay the bills on my behalf.
Right.
Like my husband's job was, it wasn't a great job at the beginning. Like it has really evolved over time. But it was really, it's almost like I almost want to say that it's like a partnership
Mm-hmm.
where, like we were here for a year. My Okay, let's go back to context. My
Mm-hmm.
immigration path has not been like the usual path. We did
Right.
not come to Canada as permanent residents.
Right.
We came with a work permit for a year, and that's when, in order to stay, we decided that I would go back to school and my husband could stay and continue working at the company where he was working.
I see.
So
There's like a practical
so
reason.
that's
Yeah.
where the partnership comes in, right? So
Right.
I'll do one thing and that allows us to stay. And
Yeah.
in the meantime, he'll bring the money home and I'll spend the money at school. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was basically the balance there, the partnership. So when the time to make the decision came, he said, "Why don't you just go back to school and do something that you're really passionate about?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, I need to put some thought into this," but I kept coming back to arts administration. So I said, "Well, I really want to go to and do like take a program on arts administration." And that's how I ended up at Centennial. He said, like, go for it. So yeah, it was the best decision ever. I really enjoyed the program. It opened
Yeah.
all these doors, and he was able to, continue working, and that gave us the sort of like the pathway to stay and become permanent residents in Canada.
Wow, there's so much there to unpack. Let me just like do one layer at a time.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I want to ask is this love for arts administration, because I think that like we in the arts we have a strong emphasis of the people who are making the arts, right? And our work is like to support that. But I think a lot of people out there are also curious about the back end, but we don't see the faces or like the voice of the arts administrator often. So, what do you think makes you love being an arts administrator so much? And what are the qualities that makes a good arts administrator?
To me, the reason why I became an arts administrator, like the passion, was really supporting artists. That's always been like the one thing that I really enjoyed, and maybe it's because I come like my dad is a photographer,
Mm,
and he was trying to be a painter at some point in his life, but again, like being an artist in Spain in what in like
mm,
the 60s, the 70s, the 80s was not a viable career. So
right,
he sort of like switched into photography and like graphic design. He was doing like, but it's always, let's say, he's always been a creative. So I
right.
come from a home where there's always been a creative and then someone really, really practical and pragmatic who's my mom. So I've seen
Ha.
that dynamic between the
Mm,
artist and the administrator at home. And I think that really has like, like impacted the way I work.
mhm.
Um, I understand how creative minds work and think. So I think that it was like really preparing me for this like passion that I ended up developing for for being an arts administrator. So
Yeah.
I don't remember the second piece of your
The second
question.
piece is like what would make a this question is especially for people who are out there that like who want to get into the arts, and sometimes they can't distinguish whether like the role of the artist or the arts administrator, especially for the art sector here. So, like for for you, what are the qualities that makes a good arts administrator?
Honestly, I mean, there are all these skills that, of course, you need to have in terms of being organized and being able to listen to like the artist's needs and your community's needs. Like there, let's say that there are all these skills that you can develop. over time, like grant writing and communications and all of that. But to me, from my perspective, and this is a personal approach,
Yeah.
it's about being being able to prioritize the needs of the people you're meant to support versus prioritizing your own needs, or like being ready to be someone who works in the back end of things, and maybe you don't get the glory of it. So I don't yeah, I know that I'm
Mm,
getting into like a difficult territory here, but
I like
you know
that. That we're getting.
like for example, there are one of the things that I see in this sector now, after
Mhm.
being working in it for like a number of years, is there are a lot of egos in this sector. I mean, it's probably the same in
Yes.
any other sectors, but there are a lot of people
Yeah.
who have an ego, and sometimes, for example, when we're producing a mural project, it's a
Hmm.
fine balance between like who gets the glory, right,
Hmm.
of the project itself, of like the recognition, if we put it that way.
Yes.
So, to me, it's very clear: we support artists. We're
Hmm.
here to support artists, but the glory belongs to the artists. Like we can take a piece of that, meaning we've been here to support you.
Hmm.
Like get the funding in place, all the project management that we do for artists. But at the end of the day, we're not doing the actual. We're not producing the actual artwork.
Yeah.
So it's very clear where our place is for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that it's needed in arts administrators, of like being able to listen more and being able to sort of like release that control, and being like, artists were born to do this and we're here to support them. Like I
Mm-hmm.
really like that facilitator role, or like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like support role, but without necessarily having to be the person being acknowledged for the work.
I
I
like
don't know.
that
I don't know if that
analogy.
explains.
Yeah, it totally does. Because so a couple of things I heard from you just replaying is like one is this. I think there's an aspect that you talk about that like the facilitator is the perfect word for it because we call it ours admin. It sounds like you're just doing a bunch of like administrative tasks, but really it's an opportunity facilitator role that us administrators do to facilitate that opportunity for the artists to shine, to create work, and being able to find satisfaction in that behind the scene work is what you're speaking to.
Yes, yes. Some artists are facilitators. I mean, we also do community arts, and like, we work with
Hmm.
artists who are facilitators, and I really like that approach, and being able to implement the like the artist facilitator, but in an administration setting.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me, and that's what I've been trying to do, and like that also like um, allows the organization to really like leverage people's voices, with like, like those with lived experiences. We're just here to do the groundwork for
Hmm.
you guys to shine.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like my approach to administration, to arts administration, and I do think that anybody willing to get into arts administration, like it's just like something to consider.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's. That was we just touched on like the really beautiful side of arts administration. Let's talk about the a little bit messy, shall we say, messy side. Because in the answer that you gave earlier about what supported you, I love that you're so candid about the partnership and the financial support from your partner. Because I have to tell you, mother, like so I went into like the arts nonprofit world. After a couple years, I realized almost I would like to say 60 to 70% of like senior managers I meet in the arts nonprofit world have a partners that earned more than they do.
Hmm.
And I at first I was like, this is intriguing that is coming out like a trend. And then I talk to you and I talk to other people, I was like, wow, it's not just me.
No.
It's definitely something that exists within the structure.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile with that? I don't even know what my question is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to say that this is something that I'm very aware of, on a daily basis. The fact that it's interesting how when you look at like leadership positions, I might have a leadership position versus my partner or husband who
Mhm.
might not be in a leadership position. And yes, I mean, it is the case that he's in that situation, but
Yeah.
like there might be the case where they're not even in a leadership position and they're still making more money than you make.
Yes.
And that is like, how is this possible?
Hmm.
So it's something that's concerning, and I've had these conversations with other people in the arts as well, because it also really, if this is my situation, sometimes I assume that I'm also only able to hire other white women who have husbands who make more money than they make, so that you know they can
You,
afford to
yeah.
take a $40,000 job, because someone else is paying the bills at home. So
And then
like
reinforce a whole slot of problem, right? Like,
and then we're perpetuating the
yeah.
same problem all over again. So the fact that for example, operating funding does not really keep up with increases in regular
Hmm.
costs in life, like the fact that our salaries don't necessarily increase every year, um, it's very problematic, because if I
Yes.
can't hire diversity, if I can't
Hmm.
hire diverse people, then how are we going to evolve as an organization?
Yeah. And by that you mean like diverse experience and like people
Yes,
who might not
like
have a partner and like people from different
exactly. If we
races. Like, yeah.
yes,
Hmm.
if we keep hiring the same type of person, like all over again, then how are we going to evolve and like really be representative of the communities we serve?
Hmm.
So as I said, like I'm really, really aware of this on a daily basis. At the same time, I also work on the operating budget for the organization, and there's only so much we can afford
Yeah.
to hire people. So it's tough. I have a feeling that like people are really quitting this sector
Yeah. I can
because
validate that by the discovery calls I've been getting that people come to
yeah,
me and talk about how do I exit the sector.
because
Hmm.
is this sustainable in the long term? Um, Probably not.
Hmm.
Like it's yeah, it,
It feels
it's
helpless sometimes to have this kind of conversation, huh?
I also don't like perpetuating systems that don't work.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what I'm doing. And this is something that does not sit well with me.
Yeah.
um, you know we've been hiring recently, um, and to be very honest, Betty, like this is the first time that we're going to be offering a benefits package with a
Hmm.
position. As of today, I do not have benefits, and it's just
You do
because we
not have
haven't.
benefits.
I do not have benefits. I rely on my husband's benefits, because this is, like we haven't had the dollars for that. And
Yeah.
now this conversation is happening at the organization and in partnership with the board.
Hmm.
And there's an added layer to this as well,
Yeah.
in terms of the benefits. And I don't think we need to get into that. But, for example, if you're like a one person organization, you can't really participate in any net benefits
Uh,
plans, because it needs to be at least two people, because it's a plan for two people. So, like there are other limitations to that.
hmm.
Anyway, that being said, yeah, like now is we're gonna, start offering benefits now, because we're
Congrats,
really,
but I say that with like a little
thank
bit
you.
sad and
Right.
concerning tone. Yeah.
Like it's just that it has. I don't think it was really part of the conversation up
Yeah.
until recently. So I was able to, like to work out the operating budget and include that
Hmm.
into the new fiscal year. At the same time, Betty, I'm getting into this dilemma of if I support arts administrators better, am I taking this money away from supporting artists?
Yes, you and I have talked about that before.
And
Because
that,
there's the pie, and that all comes from that pie. Well, actually, I would like to like address the people who might be funders listening to this podcast. I don't think you're listening. Problem is with the funding mechanism of that. For those of you who don't know, like often there's no like at the most I've seen like 15% admin fee being included in any kind of grants or allowed to be included.
yeah,
And where do we think that 15% doesn't pay anybody's salary in anybody in any organization? Well, it's not enough anyway. Uh,
yeah, like
yeah.
as an example, I can say, because this is public,
Hmm.
Mural Routes receives about $50,000 in operating funding. That's like not even one person's salary. And in addition to that, there's like office space,
Yeah.
insurance, phone, internet, audit, because we're a
Hmm.
charity, like just like, 6, 7K out of those 50 just go to into being audited.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, all our salaries rely on project funding. And it's very difficult to know, like, for example, we put our operating
Hmm.
budget together now in February, and like and it's for the next fiscal year. I don't know in February whether I'm going to have all the funding in place to actually pay for everyone's salary, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like living in this limbo where like you're constantly wondering, am I going to make ends meet this year?
Hmm.
And that's really draining. That
It
is
is
really,
very
really
draining.
draining. Yeah. And we're in a really good, healthy financial situation, and there's, like, um,
Yeah, but you are not
there's
alone,
money in the
right?
bank, but you don't know.
Even bigger charities that I've worked with, the exec directors are always worrying about do I have enough money to pay people's salary. They're not worrying about whether the programs will run because all the fundings are coming in as project and program. And
Yes.
I think it's important that we hold space for this conversation because, like, you're a managing director, I'm a fundraising consultant. So, but we are also people who have worked in the arts because I think that, like, when you are in a position that touch the money of the organization, we are especially aware where the problem is because we hear the people who are really have real struggle with their career and the stuff that they don't get in their like benefits enough salary, but we are also aware the problem is bigger than individuals can control. It lies within the funding mechanism and how the organization are structured.
Yeah. And it's also like it really depends. It's just like it's the feeling that you work on a year by year basis, and there's no opportunity for planning. Like, even if you have a strategic plan, like, 3, 5 years ahead of you, like, you still don't know what year two is going to look like in terms of funding. At least for
Hmm.
small, I'm talking about small organizations, who receive like little operating funding. I can't speak about the larger ones, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's for example, this past year there was a lot of funding that was associated with COVID recovery, so we
Hmm.
were able to access so much funding from like various sources for multiple projects. It's been a very busy year, but it's not the case in 2023 now. At least it
Yeah,
doesn't look like it's going to be the case. So
and that
now
money
I'm like, okay,
inflates the
great.
budget and the board gets the wrong perception about the
Yes.
organizational growth. Oh, it's a whole thing.
It's like it's
Yeah.
a whole thing. So
Hmm.
the board knows that it's been like a very successful year, that this is not normal, and then we're gonna go down again to like, something that's more normal for us.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just it also it also doesn't allow you to plan properly. Like this year, we've been the staff. I have to say, the staff at Mirror was like,
Hmm.
they've been great, and we were able to like step up and deliver all these programs and projects. But if we can't just go in like this roller coaster of like,
Hmm.
like we're going up and like we're delivering all these programs and then down, and then it's like the morale is very low because projects are not coming through. and then up again maybe next year because there's again like some sort of like, we're celebrating something and there's funding available.
Yeah.
It's just like, it doesn't help mental health or sort of planning for your personal life, because you
No.
never know what the year ahead of you is going to look like.
Yeah. And I want to put the spotlight specifically on managing director, executive director, because I feel so. I always say that this is like the hardest job in the world because even with the best people with the best intention, you see show like these things that you have to solve and you want to take care of the staff. But at the same time, there's only so much you can do. How do you support yourself as a, this is your first like managing director role? Like, how do you survive, Mother?
I don't.
Thank you for your honesty. Yeah.
I don't. Things fall in between the cracks. Um, Sometimes projects are running behind, not because of the people that we're working with, but because of me, because I haven't had the time to dedicate to the project. Um, it's it's honestly, I don't have the healthiest life in that sense, because I just keep pushing through, to be
Mm,
honest, because every time that I see a grant where, that it's an opportunity for us, if I have to work on that grant over the weekends, I will do it. And that's not great. It's not the
mhm.
greatest approach, but at the same time, I'm like, I need to make ends meet. And I know that securing that funding is going to give me, it's going to help me control my anxiety in the long run.
Right.
So I would rather power through, for a weekend, and avoid all the concerns in the long run.
Mhm.
That's one way. I have to say that we've also been able to create a really great working environment at Mural Routes, where, like, when I have too much on my plate, the rest of the team steps up and they're like, okay, Marta, let me take this away from you. Like, they can
Mm,
see that my plate is more than full, and they take stuff on a regular basis. Like, they're really good at seeing that.
mhm.
But then there's also like the whole, like the personal life, right? Like, I have a 3-year-old, and
Yes.
thank God for daycare that, like, doesn't do March break. Like, for example, I was thinking about March break since,
Right. We're
we're
recording
recording this
this
this week.
March break. Yeah.
And I'm like, thank God that daycare doesn't close during March break,
Hmm.
because otherwise it's like I would, like this would be a week when I can't really work.
It's
I
a
would
write
have,
off. Yeah.
yeah. And I still have one more operating grant to submit. So it's just I would say that what helps me is being extremely organized with my time. For example, what I do is on my Google Calendar, as an example, Betty, this is just an example of what
Yes.
I do
Please
on
give
my
us
calendar.
example. Yeah.
Yeah. What I do is I allocate time to work on things. I know that not everyone does that. Like, you just put like your meetings in there. But what I do is, like, if I need to write a grant, I actually block time off on the calendar, and I tell the team, I'm going to be writing a grant for these 4 hours. If you need me, I'm here. But otherwise, anything that you can wait until I'm
Yeah.
done, I appreciate it. And usually, like, unless, there's something that's urgent,
Hmm.
they always respect that. And that's the only way I manage to organize. Like, I'm extremely organized with my time.
Mm.
It's the only way I can survive in this job, because there's just like so much going on all the time, all the time.
I love that you're sharing that, and I think that would be very helpful for other to hear too. So let's unpack that a little. Because working with you, I noticed a couple habits that you have. One
Mhm.
is yours exit the meeting with a to-do list. And then second is you, whenever it's a busy grant season, I get an auto reply from you and say, I saw your email, but I'm working on grants. So tell us a bit more about like your way of organizing. But I think more importantly, A lot of people who are arts administrators are organized, but when they step into this executive director role, what they need to do is actually distinguishing what's actually urgent and important and what's perceived urgency. Tell us your take about that and how you manage that. Yeah.
Well, that was quite a bit. It was quite a learning experience
Mhm.
when I switched from program manager into becoming the managing director. Like I have to say that even like in the program manager role, I was doing some of the program management, but I was also starting to write grants for the organization. Like I was taking a little bit more on. Back then I didn't have a kid, so I had lots of time to just like learn. So um, I just like I have a thought that I want to forget about. When I stepped on
Mhm.
the managing director position, to be honest, Betty, like to be very honest, the most difficult thing was not really to organize my time.
Mhm.
The most difficult thing for me was making decisions. I wasn't used to
Mhm.
making decisions. So suddenly everyone is looking at you to make decisions quickly, smart decisions, strategic decisions. And I'm like, why
Yes.
am I the right person to make this decision now? So that was one thing.
Yeah.
I've always been very organized, and I don't want to forget, like that the conversation about. I don't want to lose that conversation about
Yes. Yeah.
how to get organized. But like the
It's
decision making was,
interwoven though. Yeah.
yes, it was like the most difficult thing for me to do. And then within 6 months after making decisions on a daily basis, that's when you say, okay, now I'm starting to feel comfortable with this. Like, like now I make decisions and I
Mhm.
don't think about the fact that I'm making decisions. They're just part of, they're just part of the job. Um, but going back to organizing, yes, I'm constantly thinking about things that help me control my anxiety. There was a time when I was having constant anxiety attacks for like a few months
Wow.
because it was just so hard to manage everything that was going on.
Mhm.
um, it was just like such a huge learning curve. So I've learned to figure out ways to deal with anxiety. And I have to say that I've been doing quite well for the past few years. So that's good. So,
Yeah.
one of the things that you're mentioning is like this year, for example, there was a lot going on with like these operating grants. And of course, my kid has been sick for like 2 months now. So,
Oh.
because that's the reality of every parent. Everyone I
Yes.
speak to, they're like, this is life.
Especially with young
Um,
children. Yeah.
yeah, which I didn't know and wasn't prepared for.
Mhm.
So I decided to put an autoresponder saying like it's grants heavy, um, season for me.
Mhm.
So I'll get back to you at my earliest convenience, right? Like there's I can only do so much, and that has helped me prioritize who needs an email right away, and then who can wait. But they already know that I'm busy and that I'm
Yep.
doing my best. But at least it's all about managing expectations, really. Like that's part of it.
Mhm.
If the other person knows that you're doing your best but you're still, it's you have to write your grants because the operating grants need to go in no matter
Mhm.
what, then it's okay. So that's one thing that I've implemented this year, and I'm not gonna lie, it was not my idea. I actually copied it from other organizations. Like when I would like email other organizations, I get an email back saying it's grants heavy season. I'm like, oh, I should be implementing this. Sometimes it's
Good
not about
job.
reinventing.
Yeah.
It's not about inventing the
It's
wheel
about
here. Like
learning.
sometimes they copy whatever is working for someone
Yeah.
else. So that's one thing, and then yeah, like scheduling that the time on my calendar like really helps for me. Like that's the
Mhm.
one thing. Otherwise, I'm gonna forget that I need to do this presentation that's gonna take me 2 hours long. I'm also gonna share sort of like one piece of advice about that.
Yeah.
I always overestimate the time that I need to complete a task. So I cheat, like I'm sort
You
of like cheating.
overestimate.
Yes, I cheat a
Ah.
little bit. So what I do is if I know that I need, let's say, an hour to put a presentation together, I allocate 2 hours in my calendar. This
I
way,
love that.
So then when if I get like, let's say 45 minutes, like,
Yeah.
I don't need to rush it because I have 2 hours. But then if I get 45 minutes off, I'm like, oh, I actually, like I've actually
Yeah.
gained 45 minutes, and like suddenly my day looks like, wow, I have 45 minutes to do something else. So you
Yeah.
accomplish more than you anticipated. So that's a way of like cheating to my brain in a way, like, like I'm tricking my brain into that.
It
And
feels
at the
like a
end of the
treat to
day,
your brain too. Like it's like, oh
yeah,
wow.
so I feel it's really satisfying at the end of the day. I'm like, oh, I was actually going to do these 4 things, but I managed to do 7 things because I had
Wow.
allocated extra time for each of them. Yeah.
I love that. I love that
That,
because
and that kind of
most people underestimate and they
yes.
scramble.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
That's such
always
a
over,
good trick.
I always overestimate the time that it takes. Like even for writing grants, I think I allocated like 10 days for
Hmm.
grant writing for one specific grant, and then it ended up being 5. And then suddenly I had all this like, free time. So this week, for example, I'm going to be like catching up with other stuff that I had to do.
And your mind feels like more at ease rather than like, oh my god, I estimated 2 days. I actually need five. Where do I find the extra three? Yeah.
Yes, but Betty,
Hmm.
this comes with experience. I did not know this, you know, 2, 3 years ago or 5 years ago when I became the managing director.
Right.
That's the thing, is like you get into this position without really knowing how long tasks take.
Hmm.
Um, so it's with time, like
Hmm.
you just like learn, there's a learning curve, but as you learn, then you also learn to manage your time more wisely, and you get to that place where you're actually able to deliver all these things, like all these tasks, and still feel good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Th-
that's 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 what makes me happy and helps me deal with burnout, or avoid burnout, that rather than deal with burnout.
yeah. Avoid like there's only so much you can do, but within what you can control, I love that you
Yes.
have designed those mechanisms. I know the audience, especially if it's they are first time executive director, would hate it. I don't return back to that insight that you had about decision making because I really think that you landed on there as someone who has worked with like other first time executive director. Decision making just kind of hit you like a I don't even know like a wave of like
Yeah.
whoa. What's your advice on that in terms of not just making decisions? I would like to say sometimes impossibly difficult decisions, and everybody looking for you to make that quickly.
Well, I would say the first thing that I would say, it's not for everyone,
Mm,
because as I
fair.
said, it's really draining. Um, I'm also a person who tends to overthink everything.
Hmm.
So overthinking is like your biggest enemy here, because you need extra time to make a decision, and suddenly you need to make a quick decision, and it's like, oh well, let's see how this goes. I have to say that the one thing that has helped me is not being afraid to make mistakes,
Mm,
because nobody knows everything. And this is something that I learned in my other life in Spain when I was a tour guide back in Spain. And one of the things that we were very used to is that people would ask questions, and you just like had to say, I don't know.
yeah.
I actually don't know the answer. Like they would ask about one specific year and like something that happened in the city. I'm like, I actually don't know.
Hmm.
So being very, very honest with the team and say, I actually don't know the answer to this. So asking for advice, like not, yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't be afraid to say you don't know.
Mm,
Like that, I think those are two things that have helped me. I've asked, like even today, I ask the team sometimes, I'm like, what do you think we should do?
mm,
Because first of all, because I want to hear what they have to say. And then because sometimes you need to hear from the people doing the actual work,
right.
not you who might not know, what the nitty gritty of like whatever task it is, right?
Hmm.
So that's one thing that helps me. Um, I was going to say something else, Betty, but I have forgotten the thought here.
But I love that two things that you just share. It's like because, especially in leadership positions, like people think that you have the answers all the time.
I
It's
also gonna
hard. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
great.
is
Going to
hard.
say.
And I was gonna
Mm-hmm.
say that there's an additional layer here, and it's the fact that I am an immigrant. I There are so many things that I don't know because I was not born or grew up in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I'm used to doing things in certain way, and there are, like there's like cultural competency in
Yeah.
here. Like, like I'm used to doing works. I'm used to doing things in certain ways, based on my culture and my
Mm-hmm.
experience as someone who was born, raised, and lived until she was almost 30 in Spain.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're taking out of place, right? You're putting like somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to start making decisions that affect other people who've learned to do things in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why to me, like, communication is very important within the team,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't have all the answers. I did not know um, so much about the city, or like even like right now, for example, working on a project where we're doing events across the province. There are some like cities and towns in
Mm-hmm.
this province that I don't even know where they are, and I have to go to Google Maps and
Mm-hmm.
actually check, because that's the reality of an immigrant. I don't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
The learning curve is so much bigger for us,
That's so
and
true.
then suddenly you're tasked with making decisions that are going to impact others. We do a lot of work in Scarborough. I don't know Scarborough as well as other people in my team
Mm-hmm.
do. So, I rely a lot on the people who actually know, because otherwise, like, I would be making the wrong decisions all the time, all the
Right.
time. um yeah, yeah, I think.
Yeah. It's like kind of like demystifying that image that the exec director is supposed to have the on the answer. But I think it's also there's something powerful there about like it's very more like asking the people who have the lived experience or the or just like the perspectives to be able to contribute to an answer that's more holistic.
The managing director role, or executive director role, CEO, whatever we want to call it,
Yeah.
it's a very tricky position, because
Yes.
basically, like, well, again, I can't speak for like larger organizations, but in small organizations, like Mural Routes, you basically need to be able to do anything, meaning you deliver programs, you curate programs, you need to know about posting on social media, but then 30% of your time goes into HR management. And it's like, what the hell do I know about HR management? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do I know? Nothing. That's not my background. That's not what I went to school for. HR is such a big piece of, executive directors in small
Huge.
organizations.
Yeah.
Huge. And I'm like, I did not get into this to do HR. Like, this is not the reason.
No one told you
Right?
either that
No
you.
one told me.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, why are we doing so much HR
Mm-hmm.
instead of, like, being able to dedicate our time to really like serving the communities that we're dedicated to serving. Um, that's something that I really struggle with, the HR piece, because it's something that I don't enjoy. I enjoy all the other work. I really like being able
Mm-hmm.
to do all, like multiple things, and like I'm capable of posting on social media, and developing partnerships, and like if I need to be at a program, I know how to do that. You know what I mean? Like, I can do pretty much anything. But the HR piece, oh man, like that's the worst part.
Yeah. So we felt like there's like so many like what I wanted to say is like truly there's no way to really get prepared for this role, right? Like that's maybe my
No.
bias. Like
Yep.
you kind of have to go into it. But let me just like kind of end our conversation in this hopefully positive note. It's like how What's your advice for someone who is still like would love to become executive director one day of an arts organization? How do they get themselves somewhat ready?
I would say, do your research, talk to people, know what you're getting yourself into. And I'm saying this from like a positive,
Yeah.
like from a
Hmm.
positive perspective. Um, it's really, it's really important, first of all, like to know what, sort of like, what piece of the arts you enjoy the most, like whether it's programming or whether it's communications, whether it's fundraising. So talk to people who are doing this job, uh, for you to know what skills you might be willing to develop further. Listen from managers, from senior managers. If you can, like invite a managing director for a coffee, just go talk about the arts, just like to mentally prepare you for what you're getting yourself into, for your, for the career path that you have
Yes.
chosen.
Hmm.
And this, I think that this really helps with preventing burnout in the long run, because you already know what you're getting into. Like you're already mentally prepared for the decision that you're making.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for this. I did not know that this journey was going to be like this. I'm still enjoying what I do. I'm not going to lie. I love being able to support artists. I love being able to have the power to change things. Like that's really something that keeps me going. Being able to change things in partnership, and but and while supporting uh, artists in the process. But now I have a much larger picture of of the arts, and of this, what this position requires.
Yeah. Well, Martha, thank you so much for this invaluable insights, and I'm sure like people who are listening to this would too, because it's rare to have like such candid insights and conversation about the good and the bad about being arts
Yeah.
administrator and a senior leader at a small arts organization. So I thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Betty, for allowing me to share this, with you and like those listening.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll continue the conversation beyond the podcast.
Oh,
Yeah.
we will.
I hope that you find today's conversation helpful as you plan for your career, especially if you're someone that's thinking to advance your arts administrator career. I'm grateful that Marta has opened up to share the challenges and the rewarding aspect of her day to day. And I especially love that she kind of delved deep into some of the tricks of like how she managed her day and her decision making. If you are someone who's thinking or on the way of becoming a executive director or managing director of arts organization, know that you're not alone in facing the challenges that you do. And I say that with all my heart because I've also supported executive directors in my career. And as much as I know that this is like one of the biggest hat to fill, I just want to say gratitude to you for what you do in the sector, but also I hope that you can find space, mentorship, or support for doing the excellent work that you do. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're listening to this episode on YouTube, I sincerely invite you to subscribe to my channel, because that with your support, you're letting more creatives out there to discover my channel and this podcast. I've been very excited to make this shift to launch the podcast on YouTube as well, so that it can provide an alternative way for you to choose the way that you want to consume content. And of course, if you're listening to this podcast on an audio format on a podcast platform, I also invite you to subscribe or save this podcast and whatever that you do to keep tabs for future episodes. As well, if you're looking for one-on-one coaching support for your career and practice, you can book a free consult call with me. My coaching programs have supported artists, artist professionals, and arts leaders to make an aligned shift in their career and practice. The link for booking the call is in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening today. I will see you on the next episode.